Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Book of Spirits by Joss Walker. Narrated by Erin Moon. Chapter 1. The Kyoto National Museum was quiet. No great shock for 4 o'clock in the morning, but the very essence of the building was peaceful, discreet. Perfect time for a nighttime raid. The kingdom operative known as Blaine came from the back of the grounds, slipping past the tea house Tan-Un, and the museum was in his sights. Just needed to get past security and he was in. On cue, a guard came clanking around the corner, and Blaine sent a stunning spell at the man, coupled with an attack designed to cut off the electrical signals to the man's heart. He was dead before his eyes closed. Blaine caught him before he fell, lowering him gently to the ground so as not to make a sound and give away his position. There would be more, and he was prepared to take them all if needed. He told himself that he'd taken the man's life because the guard was in his way, that he was human, had no magic, and therefore preserving the life was pointless. His mission, his role as a kingdom operative, had no room for regrets. But in the back of his mind, he knew he'd done it with the hope that a fresh sacrifice might appease the monsters in the sky. They circled and danced above him, his own personal air force. One smelled the kill and swooped down. The guard was gone in a flash. Moments later, the remains of his body fell to the ground with a heavy thump. Blaine cringed, but moved forward. He couldn't have imagined the world as they knew it now. Ruth Thorne, overtaken by a wraith and answering to a dark overlord only she could speak with. More and more adepts appearing all over the world, magic swirling like a poisonous fog. Dark creatures of lore springing forth. The torrent was breaking free, but not in a way it should have. And it was all that stupid girl's doing. Getting their hands on the grimoires was more important now than ever. The battle must go their way. The TCO and Jayne Thorne must not prevail. Blaine moved like the night itself around the side of the building. The air outside was cold and humid, faintly smelling of gasoline and salt. Another scent lurked beneath the entirely non-magical human ones. A faint, burning stench that stuck to the inside of his nose and seemed to rot there. The grand brick and sandstone European-style building that housed the main collection of the National Museum had a portico entrance for visitors. But there was no reason to try the front, where more guards would surely be stationed. Instead, Blaine chose to press his hand to the solid steel door of the employee entrance. He pulled an unlock spell from the torrent with an ease that was new to him. He was still getting used to the intense flush of power. Spells that had once drained his power now seemed to invigorate him. "Let my enemies come at me now." He slipped through the door and down a dark, dry, blissfully bland-smelling hallway. He cloaked himself, giving the finger, one he knew couldn't be seen, to a security camera. Blaine reached a simple, wide-stepped stairwell. He closed his eyes, breathed in, and waited for the call of the grimoire. It didn't take long. Power called to power, and his new magic had made something of him indeed. The tugging felt like a hook in the back of his spine. He headed down the stairs into the bowels of the museum. The security became tighter the farther down he went. But what would once have been a challenging puzzle at the edge of his abilities was almost child's play now. Even the magical wards and alarms that blanketed the door at the center of the museum basement could be unlocked with a few moments' concentration. The room beyond was blacker than black. Blaine called a soft light to him, mindful of any potential artifacts and their sensitivity to brightness. Ruth Thorne, the head of the kingdom, had specially selected him for this mission, and he didn't dare let her down. Not now that she was... whatever she was. There. A large metal safe stood against one corner, locked with a keypad and several magical wards, layered in a tricky calligraphy that commanded Blaine's attention for a few minutes. He carefully separated the spells and disarmed them one by one. He was barely out of breath by the time he set his sights on the keypad. He grinned again. He felt invincible. Then he recalled the sight of Ruth Thorne's storm-steel eyes filling up with black, and he remembered there were some powers he still bowed to in this world. He opened the safe with a quiet click. Something flashed hot. An alarm blared not in the museum but in his consciousness, like a neon light flashing from the torrent. Damn, he must have missed a ward lurking in the mundane lock. He needed to hurry. He peered into the safe, holding his conjured light as close as he dared. The safe was neatly lined with rows of ancient texts, written on linen and paper and even papyrus. Each text floated between two plates of glass, protecting it from the outside elements and the oils of researchers' fingers. It also made things easier for stealing. Blaine ran his fingers along the tops of the plates, probing with his mind, waiting for the call of the grimoire. There were only a few known fragments remaining of the original Man-yo-shu, the revered anthology of Japan's epic poems. Some didn't believe any originals truly existed, but Blaine could sense magic straining to be released. This was one, or a portion of it, at least. It seemed to spark against his fingers. His hand closed around it reflexively, and he pulled the glass panel free. Crisp, neat lines of calligraphy sat on a stark white background, the edges torn, half of the poem missing, and the power swirling within. He could almost see it, the glass filling with a fog invisible to the naked eye. This had to be it. For a brief moment, Blaine considered trying his luck. What if he could return to the kingdom with the spirit totem bound irrevocably to him? He thought of Ruth's eyes again, and tucked the grimoire safely in a carry spell. Blaine had survived by knowing his place in the world, knowing when to step forward and when to fade into the background. Besides, he didn't have time to mess with the grimoire. He needed to get out of here. He didn't bother closing the safe or masking his tracks. The Japanese authorities would never be able to trace this back to the kingdom, and it wasn't like they would admit to the world they'd been burgled. Bad for business. He headed for the door and the hallway beyond. Extinguishing the soft light, he moved swiftly down the corridor. He wasn't sure whether he heard the soft exhale of breath or the searing whiz of a spell coming at him, but Blaine dropped to the ground right as an attack spell smashed into the wall next to where his head had been. He swapped the cloaking spell for a shield just as a second attack spell bounced off it. Whoever his opponent was, they were fast. His eyes adjusted to the light, and he saw a wall of a man. He wore a loose linen wide-sleeved shirt and wide pleated trousers. A samurai sword was sheathed at his massive waist. A disciple of Gaia, Blaine realized with a mental sneer. Well, these magical hippies were an easier enemy than the TCO. He sent an attack spell of his own spinning down the hall. The disciple dodged it with ease.
"You have something that does not belong to you, foreigner,"
the man said in a crisply accented English. Blaine brought up his broad hands and shrugged.
"I guess it's what we do."
He fired off another attack, aimed high. While the disciple reacted, he sent a second spell to sweep the man's feet, and he fell hard. Blaine took his chance to flee, running down the hall. A moment before he catapulted himself over the disciple, Blaine summoned a magical spike that went through the man's thigh, pinning him in place. The disciple screamed, and Blaine was away. More disciples would come soon, and more guards. Now that he had the grimoire,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?